Welcome to Talk Law Radio with attorney Todd Marquardt of the Marquardt Law Firm at marquardtlawfirm.com.
Welcome back to Talk Law Radio. I'm Todd Marquardt here with Joseph Warren, who is with, what's the name of your company?
Financial Planning HQ.
Financial Planning HQ. And you do financial planning?
Yep.
Good. And we're here to talk about money, banks, and the FDIC. But before we get into that, I wanted to say something about advice. Because you give advice, I give advice.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to ask the ladies and gentlemen listening today, has anyone ever asked you for advice? Did you feel good knowing that you had the education and experience and God's providence to finally get to weigh in and give somebody some good advice? And further, did that person asking for your advice finally reject your advice? I had a similar thing happen to me. I was meeting with somebody at my office, someone who wanted legal advice to make sure that they were going to be able to follow the law. I said, I can help with that. And they went on to tell me the situation and what they wanted to do. And I cautioned them against doing it. I said, the law might be very unforgiving if you proceed with that plan of action. She scooted her chair back, stood up, and walked out. Yeah. And I thought, I was so offended and just in shock about what happened because maybe that's the first time that someone's ever done that to me. Yeah. So today I'd like for ladies and gentlemen, open your minds to what's happening, what's been going on in recent history, health pandemics, political division, economic uncertainty. It's a good time for you to examine who you're going to trust, who you're going to get your information from, and whose advice you're going to take when the next shoe drops. I'm Todd Marquardt, host of Talk Law Radio on KLUP 930 AM The Answer. You can subscribe to my YouTube channel where you can catch up on other hidden issue blind spots. So, Joseph, I wanted to define money for the listeners here today.
Yeah.
And so Encyclopedia Britannica defines money as a commodity accepted by general consent as a medium of economic exchange. It is the medium in which prices and values are expressed. It circulates from person to person and country to country, facilitating trade, and it is the principal measure of wealth. Comments?
It's more convenient than the barter system that we used to use, right? Because a lot of times, we could barter. Let's say you do estate planning. I need a will. Mm-hmm. I would have to need a will at that point in time, or I would have to need your services at that point in time.
Right.
And you wanted finances. You'd be like, you'd have to need financial planning at that exact point in time.
Right.
It's
same thing if you were going to trade for eggs or gasoline.
Yeah. If you don't need eggs, you or you're a chicken farmer, and the person who has the gas station doesn't need eggs, and you'd have to go work out a bunch of deals. There'd be a lot of time wasted.
Right. You'd have to find somebody who did have something that the gasoline owner needed.
Yeah.
Trade for trade.
Yep. Another thing is, there's currencies do fluctuate. We've seen currencies undergo hyperinflation, things like that. So that does happen. So you just got to be careful.
Right.
Yeah.
So the International Monetary Fund defines money as something that holds its value over time, can be easily translated into prices, and widely accepted. And just like you explained with the barter system, they gave examples like that too. Many things have been used as money: shells, barley, peppercorns, gold, silver, and so that reminded me about the gold standard.
Yeah.
Well, President Nixon was president when it was announced that the gold was no longer going to be the standard to support the dollar. That was in 1971. Mm-hmm. So nowadays, money is what the U.S. government says it is, right?
Kind of, yeah. If we have faith in it, it has value.
Okay, well that's what's important here.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to talk about money because of the bank problems that have been in the news.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think led up to the Silicon Valley Bank problem?
There's so many factors. It's kind of crazy if you think about it.
Well, let's just talk about some of them that you remember.
Yeah. I'm just going to go, I don't want to go back to like the 70s, the gold standard, but I'll go back to 2008.
Okay.
We had, a global financial crisis at that point in time. And the U.S. government at that point in time was like, we need to stimulate the economy. And the way they do that a lot of the times is making more money, printing money, as you would say.
Mm-hmm.
But they do that with interest rates. So interest rates at that point in time I think they were about 4% before that crisis, the real estate bubble crashed. And they went down to 0.25%, so near zero. And that was a whole era from 2008 until the pandemic, where interest rates were near zero.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens when that happens, so say like, a mortgage was 8% and now it's 2%, people start getting loans. You get this, there's a lot of credit being created, which creates money, which stimulates the economy, but then you get some manias as well. So one of the currencies I think that was used before was tulips. And I don't know if you've heard of tulip mania, but there was entire country was obsessed with tulips. They were selling for thousands and thousands of dollars, what would be the equivalent.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of like fidget spinners or something else, the fad went away, and that whole economy crashed, basically. I think it was the Dutch.
Okay.
But we had manias now. If you think about 2021, you had AMC, GameStop, a lot of these stocks being pumped up just based on hype. And that was kind of seeing a lot of more money out there. That was after stimulus checks too. So then we had the pandemic, and interest rates were already near zero, but they were like, we still need to stimulate the economy. So what did they do? They did the stimulus checks. I think there were 3 rounds of stimulus checks. And they even, bumped them down to 0% again, or close to 0%. So that really got the economy going. But a side effect of that was we got inflation. Everything got more expensive. So generally you want inflation to be about 2%, healthy, sustainable growth in inflation. Mm-hmm. But at this point, it was getting towards 7%, towards 9%, which, that means if you had $1,000, right, it was now worth at the end of the year, it would be worth $910. Mm-hmm. You're losing value on your money very quickly. And of course, it's built on faith, right?
Right.
So they were like, that's not good politically. That's not good economically, right? If there's a lot of inflation, people, are complaining about the price of gas, eggs, everything.
Right.
So how do they fight against inflation? What they do is they raise interest rates. And that's the new era that we're in. And a lot of economists, a lot of very smart hedge fund managers, billionaires say that we are in an era that's different from the one before. Now we're in a rising interest rate era where they're tightening it.
Let me say something about 2008.
Yeah.
I graduated from St. Mary's Law School in 2006.
Yeah.
And I was so just out of school 2 years practicing law, and I had a stable job. I had a fixed salary, and in 2008, gas prices went up.
Yeah.
And if you have a fixed salary and prices of anything goes up, mm-hmm. then you have to change things. You have to change your standard of living.
Yeah.
And so the only thing I could really change was the grocery budget. Mm-hmm. So I went to eating peanut butter and jelly and rice and beans and rice. And so that's how sometimes inflation can affect people mm-hmm. that have a fixed income. Seniors a lot of times have a fixed income because they're retired and collecting their pension or their Social Security.
Yeah.
So that affects them too.
Yeah, it's very tough on a lot of people, right? It's not good for a lot of people's personal economies, especially if you're retired. And students too, yeah. You kind of live that life with me, like I was talking about Trader Joe's soup.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, it can be very tough when everything's getting more expensive. And that's how they fought it, was rising interest rates to slow down the economy.
Yeah, so the rising interest rates, I think, led to this bank problem with Silicon Valley mm-hmm. because a lot of the bank's money was tied up in treasury bonds that were paying low interest.
Yep. At the lowest, they were close to 0%, but they were paying about 1% probably on average. And now those bonds are paying close to 3.5%. So if you think about which one would be worth more, a bond that they're both the same amount of safety. One pays you 350% more, 3.5% interest. The other one's paying you 1%. Nobody wanted these bonds.
Right. And so when the customers of that bank wanted to take their money out, the banker said, well, we can sell some of these bonds, but we're going to have to sell them at a discount. And that was going to be bad for the bank.
Yeah. It's interesting because you would think that that's a safe investment, right? Treasury bonds. And it was safe at the time they did it. But with rising interest rates, starting in 2022, very rapidly, they've gone from close to 0% to 4%. With that, those bonds, they had to sell them, I think, at a 20% loss. Then they announced it, and people on Twitter, we also live in an interesting world where information goes real quick.
Right.
A lot of tech people are on Twitter. We're like, hey, we need to get our money out of here. And they also weren't heeding the FDIC. So I think 97% of the money in Silicon Valley Bank was uninsured money.
Because it was above the $250,000 insured amount.
Yeah.
And so that's what, well, I don't know. Why did the government just not let that bank fail?
I believe the reason why is because we were talking about this a little bit earlier, but bank scares could even hurt a financially sound bank. So they didn't want the panic to spread because fear is one of those emotions that's very contagious. If you see someone just run out of a building, there's a good chance you're going to be like, oh, something's going on. I'm going to run out too.
Right.
So they, the banks also are built on a level of trust as well. So they said, we'll make these depositors whole. It's kind of an interesting situation. And they thought they said that would be the lowest cost solution to taxpayers, which actually didn't fund this one. So taxpayers did fund the 2008 bailouts, but we did not actually fund this one, but we may see it later with bank fees and things like that. The banks had to pay.
So it's a loan to the bank.
Yep.
Okay. So the $300 billion that the government used, that was just loans.
There were 1-year loans for banks, emergency loans. Yeah.
Okay.
And basically saying we'll take that bad long-term debt, that's 1% that nobody wants, so you can hold it to maturity. We'll just give you the cash for it. It's collateral.
Okay.
That's what they did.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was one of my questions. Where was the money going to come from to pay for all that?
Yeah.
So there was $300 billion in emergency funds. That's what Joseph's been talking about. And so you think that maybe that was okay to stop the panic. But what's going to be a more long-term solution for this?
I mean, I don't think it's not good. But I think it was better than 2008 for sure when the taxpayers paid to bail out big banks. But I think a long-term solution, and what a lot of banks should be doing, is looking at their balance sheets, realizing we're in a new era of rising interest rates, and seeing what adjustments they need to make, even if it's little by little, to make their balance sheets better. Maybe hold more cash.
Yeah.
What I would say.
Okay. We're here on Talk Law Radio, and we have to take a break, but stay tuned. And if you ever want to listen to other episodes of Talk Law Radio, you can find a whole list of them on talklawradio.com. And if you want, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel. Just search for Talk Law Radio. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
This has been Talk Law Radio with attorney Todd Marquardt, brought to you by the Marquardt Law Firm. You can learn more at marquardtlawfirm.com. And be sure to listen to the full Talk Law Radio show Saturday mornings at 11 on 9:30 a.m. The Answer.
Each week, attorney Todd Marquardt talks about the law. His mission with the Talk Law radio show and podcast is to help you discover your legal issue blind spots. In the beginning, God had one law. Don't eat from the fruit of that tree. Then came the 10 Commandments. Now we have federal, state, and municipal lawmakers that won't stop creating new laws. Laws that might impact you without you knowing it. Listen to the show and drop a line on Facebook or email host@talklawradio.com and let the host know what you think of the show, the topics you want to hear, and whether you want to be a guest.